Yeah, I picked up my first camera 13 years ago, and I immediately felt like I had found something that I had been looking for a really long time. I found so much joy in the process of photography, the camera, everything photography. Since that point, I've been chasing that same original feeling of pure joy and inspiration from the art of photography. So why on earth would I buy a Leica Q3? It's not for the name Leica, it's because it's light. I wanted something that I could hike with 5 miles, 10 miles, 15 miles, and take pictures of sunsets and sunrises and hilltops and mountaintops and everything and anything that I wanted to take pictures of. Yes, Leica is a beautiful name and they make beautiful cameras, but I promise it wasn't the main motivation. It wasn't even a motivation. It was the size, it was the weight, it was the usability, and it was the lack of friction. That's been a major theme in my life as a creator recently. What is the least amount of friction I can create or have equipment create in order for me to create? It's interesting that I'm shooting on a GoPro and I'm shooting on a Leica. These are very different tools, and it's all about having the least amount of friction. So I'm perfectly happy with my Sony cameras. If you know me, you know I shoot on Sony. Years ago I shot on Canon, and years before that I shot on Nikon. And I don't really care what camera I'm shooting with or what brand I'm shooting with. I just want something to work, and I want something to work well. And like I said before, I really want something that gives me as little friction. And the Leica Q3 is doing that for me right now. Although an A7 body with a lens is almost the exact same size as the Q, which is surprising, the Q is actually lighter. It makes a big difference. It's the difference between, an A7R5 and a 28 or 35 millimeter prime, and this feels significant. It feels like I'm carrying around a lot less, and that has allowed me to take a lot of pictures. The majority, if not all of the photos that I'm showing you here that I've taken in the last couple weeks may not have ever been taken, just because I wouldn't have necessarily brought a camera out. But the Q3 has inspired me to bring it out, not because it's a Leica, but because it's light and it's easy. And it honestly feels like I'm not really carrying around anything. So over the years, I've tried to use other compact cameras like the Ricoh GR3 and little point and shoot film cameras, but they really didn't give me what I needed long-term, which was higher image quality, just like a bigger mirrorless camera. The fact that the Q3 has the same 60 megapixels as the A7R5 allows me to capture the best quality anywhere I am at any time. For me, the Q3 has unlocked a little bit of inspiration inside of me that's been pent up for quite some time. I know we shouldn't rely on equipment to unlock potential or inspiration, but sometimes, not all the time, you have to be inspired by the stuff you're using, just like you have to be inspired by the places you're going to, the things you're seeing, the subjects you're shooting. So I don't want this to be like a hype thing, like a Q3, oh my gosh, yes. It's not, honestly. I had a Leica Q1 a number of months ago. I tried to, taste the Q system, and I actually didn't like it at all. I thought it was old, it felt sluggish, the experience didn't get me going, and honestly, the pictures didn't do anything for me. It didn't impress me, and I sold it instantly. But I knew the Q3 would be different. I knew their newest iteration of the camera would have a faster processor, snappier autofocus, and I had high hopes that it would deliver. And it has. I'm happy with it, and the cons list is small. So with that, let's talk about some pros and cons. Let's start with the pros. It's light, it's small, it feels really good. All the buttons are super simple. The operation is really nice and beautiful. I'm not really digging into the menus ever. I adjust my iris here in the front of the lens. I usually leave it on aperture priority, which that means it picks the shutter speed for me. And then I have hotkey buttons to change things like ISO. And what I'll usually do is pick like a film stock ISO or film speed. In my mind, I'll be like, hey, we're shooting Portra 400 or whatever. And sometimes we're actually shooting Portra 400 alongside digital. So I'll just leave it at 400 ISO and I'll have it on aperture priority. And then depending on the subject I'm shooting, maybe I'll shoot wide open at 1.7, or maybe I'll stop it down to f8. One concern I had about the Q3 and why I was turned off in previous generations of the Q series was the EVF. I had tried a Q2 a couple years back and I wasn't impressed by the EVF. The fact that there's no hood around it and just the resolution, really didn't like the experience. But like I said earlier, I kind of had high hopes for the newest iteration of the Q, and I'm happy to say that I am pleased with the experience. So for the cons, which are obviously subjective, just like the pros, the first thing that we have to talk about is the lens. Yes, it says it is a 28mm 1.7 Summilux, which is Leica's version of saying 1.4. It's not a 1.4, it's a 1.7, but they still call it a Summilux. But it's not a 28. And this isn't new. If you search it, you'll find that it's actually more like a 24 or 25. That's the biggest gripe that I have with the camera. I would love it if it was a true 28, but it's not. It's closer to a 25mm. And so if you like shooting wide, you will love this camera. But if you are more of a 35 person, you might have some serious issues with this camera. Yes, there is a really cool sort of frame lines for 35, 50, 75, and 90, where you can digitally punch in to the 61 megapixels and have plenty of resolution and things look great. But I don't want to operate that way. I like a full frame. I want to see my entire image in the viewfinder. And I personally have committed to embracing whatever the heck focal length this actually is and shooting with it, because I love the Q experience so much. I also took it of a challenge to myself to say, just shoot this thing and see what happens. I hope this video gives you guys some insight into the Q system, specifically the Q3. And I hope that my opinion or my angle in this whole thing gives you guys a different perspective. See you guys in the next one. Thanks.